should be free to ask questions.
Absolutely. Does that need to be stated?
Both the professors.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was the spirit during my time.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Harbans has captured the ethos of JNU very well, and so I would not actually go over that ground, except possibly to just begin with one anecdote. When I first joined JNU, me and my wife, we had come from abroad. We both joined JNU as associate professors. Those days, whoever joined JNU used to be called by the Vice Chancellor to his office to kind of, be talked to and, generally to acquaint himself with. So we were both called. Romila one day called us, said that, GP wants to talk to you, so please go. So we went to GP's room. And so GP told us that, look, I have no doubts that you will make names for yourself in the academic world. But you should always ask yourself the question, what are you doing for the people of the country? This was the Vice Chancellor's first kind of pep talk to us. I think the fact that in JNU there is a different ethos which all of us are familiar with and which Harbans has so beautifully captured, something which I shall not discuss any further. The question is, how did this university come into being? How did such a place at all come into being? It's not a very easy question to answer, because even though you may have intentions, how is it that actually the particular ingredients that go into the making of a university like this happen to come together? And I think in the period when JNU started, there was such a conjuncture, which again Harbans has referred to, in which I think there were those ingredients, like life on earth. JNU began because a whole set of conditions happened to come together to establish this university. Now, obviously, it was a university established by the state, and it so happened that in that particular period of time, the Indian state was in a conflictual relationship with the US. Bangladesh war, or in the run-up to the Bangladesh war. So in a sense, there was a certain ethos of anti-imperialism which was in the country, and the state setting up the university was, of course, giving expression to that ethos. But at the same time, this university having been set up was not, JNU is not something anybody planned. It is not what was visualized by those who set it up, because the university went much beyond particularly the kind of vision that the state may have had in setting it up. In fact, I'm sure no state, not even the most liberal state, would really be comfortable with a university which has such an extremely democratic ethos. As Harbans' story about Indira Gandhi's coming demonstrates, she is the one under whose prime ministership the university had been set up, but on the other hand, she is the one against whom the students were protesting. They wouldn't even wish to let her enter. So no state that sets up a university really wants a university of this kind. They would feel uncomfortable with a university of this kind. Then how is it that actually such a university did get set up? Firstly, of course, there was, as I said, the general ethos of anti-imperialism. And secondly, all the things that Harbans was talking about, namely this was a period in which there was the Vietnam War that was going on. This was a period in which all over the world there were student protests, student movements. There was very militant popular movements within India, starting from Naxalbari, going on all the way to the worker railway strike and so on. It was a period of great agitation, popular movements and so on. And of course, therefore, also a great period of theoretical churning. Wonderful works used to come out. And what is more, whether you did science, whether you did economics, whether you did history, you actually read all that theoretical stuff. People like Alok Bhattacharya, who was the dean of this school, they tell me that they used to go around listening to these debates in Stalin, Trotsky, and this and that. He's a life sciences person. But that did not matter. That everybody was engaged in this churning of ideas. And
Model production debate in India.
So the thing is that, that it was a period of upsurge. It was a period in which the state started it in an anti-imperialist mood, but on the other hand, it went much beyond the state's particular plans. But having done that, how is it? Okay, you started a university, very good university, and so on, but then the question is, what kind of a role did it play in the context country, and I think this is something which I'd like to spend a bit of time on, that if you are talking about a country like India, which is, let us say, moving towards a state in which you are trying to establish a secular democratic polity. You are trying to follow a development trajectory that is both socially and economically egalitarian. You are trying to give expression to an inclusive nationalism. All this becoming of India, this fact of a country moving beyond decolonization to establishing a new order which promises something to the people. Now that journey has a number of requirements. Many of these requirements were recognized, many were not recognized. Those that were recognized, some of them were met, some of them were not met. For instance, land redistribution was a requirement which was recognized but not met. Public sector was a requirement which was recognized and met. Now, in all that, however, one requirement that was never even recognized was the necessity for having an intellectual base on which this journey could actually rely on. Strange, because post-independence India set up IITs. In other words, they were supposed to be a part of our technological, attempt at technological self-reliance, scientific, kind of umbrella under which the technological self-reliance could be achieved and so on. But no effort was made to set up an institution that would, in terms of social sciences, humanities, in terms of the liberal disciplines, in terms of the critical disciplines, provide the kind of intellectual muscle to this journey of a country, of a people who actually are moving towards secularism, democracy, and inclusiveness and so on that we talk about. Now, this is a remarkable, glaring failure. Now, to say this is not to say that we did not have outstanding institutions. We had wonderful institutions, wonderful people in those institutions. St. Stephen's College, where I studied, Delhi School of Economics, and so on and so forth. There are many institutions, but all of them are, in a sense, legacies of the past. And in some sense, they also were institutions that, while being quite progressive, nonetheless were rooted in the past. There was no new institution, or I like putting it in Gramscian language, there was no attempt to set up an institution that would produce the organic intellectuals of this new society. There was no attempt at all. That was very surprising, Now, I think this is something which made itself felt, and obviously I think JNU, when it was set up, fulfilled that role, but it went beyond fulfilling that role. I think two areas in which this JNU played this role, and which until that time had been ignored, I'll just list them. One is in the area of the state. Now, I think all of you, most people, sometimes wonder that when you have a change from a colonial state to a post-colonial state, there must be some change in the nature of the state. I mean, how come that you have the same civil service, you have the same ICS, which is now renamed IAS? In other words, how is it that the state continues? Now, this is something which had its plus and minus points. I've got a friend who's an economist, development economist, concentrates on Africa. He was an advisor to President Julius Nyerere for many years. He says that one of the big differences between India and Africa, and he puts it as a plus point of India, is that you actually have the steel frame of the bureaucracy. In Africa, that did not happen. Therefore, the administration really suffered a lot in the transition. But he says that in India you had that. But on the other hand, while even though that is true in the sense that the steel frame of the bureaucracy adapted itself, many of them already were highly sympathetic to the anti-colonial struggle, to the freedom movement. So they actually made a transition towards a new India with loyalties and commitment to the new India. One area in which they were unfortunately lacking is their attitude towards social egalitarianism. In other words, you really did not have, in my view, as a very crude generalization, the kind of sensitivity to the Dalits, the sensitivity to the backward castes and so on, that you needed New India's bureaucracy to have. In fact, the story goes that in a state like UP, it's only when Mayawati became chief minister that a Dalit would be offered a chair in a police station. So the point is that there was, therefore, even though we inherited a bureaucracy from British India, which actually had played a major role and played a major role in a period of difficult transition, nonetheless, it was limited in very crucial ways, and particularly in its kind of attitude towards social issues and issues of social egalitarianism. The other area, and of course this is where I think JNU started producing people who were of a different mold, and I think that's where the admission policy of JNU was very important. The admission policy that actually emphasized affirmative action, that emphasized reservations, and in fact when I joined the university, we had a very complicated admission procedure of 20 backwardness points. There were, I think, 9 for social backwardness, 7 for economic backwardness, 4 for regional backwardness, and
you have to tell your schooling from.
That's right, exactly. If you studied in Mayo College, which was in Rajasthan, while the district in Rajasthan may be considered regionally backward, you were not given the backwardness point. So, very complicated, but the point is that it did play a very important role in democratizing and broadening admission in JNU. And that is something which continues to this day, and that's why I have a lot of sympathy for the students who are criticizing this whole, admission, all this business about 100 marks and, written test only being qualifying and so on and so forth. I think that is a big asset of JNU, the like of which very few universities in India have to this day. And that in turn produced a number of new people, new students. They joined across the board. JNU students got into IS, JNU students got into economics profession, JNU students got into media, JNU students got into everywhere, teaching, wherever they went. There is a certain democratic ethos you carried because you met people across the spectrum, across the social spectrum. I come from a college, St. Stephen's College, which actually had mainly the elite children. So the fact that you actually had students across the spectrum was a very important thing. And that is something which in a sense, in one particular sense, played the role of producing organic intellectuals of a new kind. The other area, which is very important as far as I'm concerned, is that, relates to the sphere of research academia. You see, it's very easy in India to set up a good MA teaching college. In fact, I believe that in India, some of the undergraduate or MA teaching colleges that existed when I was a student or an undergraduate were among the finest in the world. Whether it's Presidency College, you look at Amartya Sen's recently brought out a book, Collective Choice and Social Welfare. As undergraduates in Presidency College, they used to sit in the coffee house and discuss the proof of a very complex theorem of Kenneth Arrow called impossibility theorem. And Kenneth Arrow died last month. A very well-known Nobel laureate in economics and so on. Undergraduate students. So you had wonderful undergraduate colleges. The college I came from was wonderful. Similarly, Elphinstone College, or Madras Christian College, or Loyola College, or St. David's College, and so on. You can actually have excellent B Honours and MA teaching centres in India, and you had across the disciplines. What you did not have is a good research place. The best students from all these would go abroad for their PhDs, for their whatever, and they'll come back. I mean, some of them would come back and start teaching. But they would teach students who again were very good, but they would also go abroad in order to finish their PhDs. A research ethos never existed. If a research ethos does not exist, in that case, the overwhelming impression you have, certainly I know about my discipline, is this impression that really speaking, knowledge is produced there. We have to get hold of that knowledge in order to pass it down to our students. And of course, the better we got hold of that knowledge, the more intelligent we were, the more committed we were, the harder working we were, we got hold of that knowledge better. So if your index was how best you are an intermediary through whom the knowledge produced in the metropolitan centers is passed down to Indian students. Now JNU broke that. It broke that because it really, for the first time, actually set up a research ethos, a research atmosphere. It's the first time you had in JNU, in every center, 5, 6, 10 in history center, many more PhD theses of excellent qualities being produced. This was never done. When I was a student in Delhi School of Economics, there were hardly ever any PhD student. You could actually count on your fingertips once in 2 years maybe. There was one brilliant student who used to do research under Professor Amartya Sen, and one day Amartya Sen saw his name in the IAS list topping. So he actually called him, this name I see, is it your name? He said, yes. In other words, such was the kind of sense of isolation, frustration among the research students, because the best went abroad anyway. So if you are stuck here, you were considered second-rate, or at best partaking of a second-rate atmosphere, that you got frustrated, so you started joining IAS, and so nobody finished research. I believe things are changing now, but whatever it is, JNU broke all that. And therefore, for the first time, you actually had a research atmosphere, and that research atmosphere also meant freedom from the hegemony of knowledge as practiced in metropolitan centers. Now, obviously, if you go to Cambridge or to Oxford, to Harvard, nobody there has heard of Dadabhai Nauroji. Okay. But on the other hand, if you are doing economic history in India, you must know of Dadabhai Nauroji. So, in a sense, by simply becoming throughputs through whom knowledge developed there is supposed to be passed down to our students, we really completely were, I shouldn't say completely, but to a very significant extent, hegemonized by metropolitan centers. I mean, I think this intellectual hegemony of imperialism was broken by JNU. So in one way, it was very important because of this inclusiveness, social inclusiveness that the admission procedure and the ethos that Harbans was talking about brought into being. And in another sense, it actually broke the intellectual hegemony of imperialism. That for the first time, you actually had a place in India where people were writing about feudalism in Indian history. We were not listening to what somebody else is writing, Perry Anderson or somebody else is writing about feudalism in Indian history. We were actually having our own people writing about what was their feudalism in Indian history. Some of it had started before, but JNU really was one institution that actually carried it forward. Now, I think that is extremely important in a society like ours, and I believe this happened not because, as is these days claimed, there was one hegemony of a particular set of ideas. There was complete discussion of all kinds of ideas. Harbans and I disagree on hundreds of issues, but you know, that did not prevent it. So it's a complete misnomer to think that there was one kind of thing which was being handed down, which was being imposed and all the rest of it. But I think this attack which is coming on JNU at this moment is, in a sense, not just an attack on JNU. I think it is an attack on this entire journey of India, for which I see JNU as having become an intellectual base. Okay? In other words, the substitution of one particular notion of nationalism for the inclusive nationalism that was the objective of the anti-colonial struggle, is a substitution of one particular kind of, let's say a neoliberal trajectory for the enormous economic debates we used to have about what should happen. Should agriculture get this much? Should industry get this much? Should we have kind of control of capital? Should we have this, that? So a whole range of issues are now getting foreclosed. We are actually moving towards a world in which we are talking of a very different journey. Not the journey that actually began in 1947, which was the legacy of the anti-colonial struggle, but a very different kind of journey. Now, it's not very surprising that in that kind of a journey, this kind of an institution becomes a hurdle. This kind of an institution which produces organic intellectuals of the people, a people making a particular journey that was a part of the anti-colonial struggle, that actually becomes a hurdle. Now, when it becomes a hurdle, I could even understand if you had the substitution of one kind of thought for another kind of thought. But effectively what you're having is a substitution of non-thought for thought. And when you have a substitution of non-thought, I would not mind if the government said, okay, we are going to set up a university of our own. We're going to make a wonderful university, give lots, crores of rupees and set up something else. Let it rival JNU, outshine JNU, I'll be perfectly happy. But on the other hand, what we are having is a substitution of non-thought for thought. But when you substitute non-thought, effectively, you're substituting the hegemony of imperialist thought. Because if you have non-thought, then obviously for thought you have to turn somewhere. And then typically what you do is that you don't turn to institutions like JNU, but you turn to whatever is happening elsewhere. You simply once more become sort of, second-hand recipients of all kinds of stuff which is happening elsewhere. That critical studies are very important. You can actually have that kind of second-hand, being second-hand recipient, perhaps, Professor Yadav would correct me, perhaps in technological areas, but certainly not in critical thought. I will tell you a story then I read. That Terry Eagleton, the well-known English literary theorist and so on, has a story that he went to a university in South Korea, where he was taken around the university, and beautiful labs and very lush kind of rooms and so on. And so he was shown all that by a person who we would call Vice Chancellor, they call the CEO of that particular establishment. So at the end of it, he asked the Vice Chancellor, but tell me, where are your critical disciplines located? So the Vice Chancellor looked very, the CEO looked very puzzled, turned to his registrar or whatever, second in command, and they looked very puzzled. And the Vice Chancellor said, well, we shall look into it. Critical disciplines are the strength of places like JNU. And if this is destroyed, as I said, it is not just a substitution of non-thought for thought, it's a substitution of hegemony to imperialist thought for whatever thought that we have been able to develop here.